Okay, cool. All right, thank you. So the meeting is being recorded. Hopefully everyone agrees with that. So the first order of the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes of the last call, which was a fortnight ago. And I thank you for Jamie for taking a set of very extensive notes. And we have presenters who uploaded the slide decks onto the conference page as well. The details of the meeting minutes are here on the screen for those of you who haven't had a chance to peruse it. So I will pause for a minute or so for people to have a quick glance if you don't have already have a chance to before I entertain a motion for accepting the minutes and the second, and then we can move ahead.
I'm happy to move for approval, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jane. We have Jane moving to accept the minutes of the previous meeting, which was dated the 17th of this month. Anyone who would like to second this motion? Thank you, Daniel, for seconding that. So anyone who has any recommendation for changes or wants to raise any concerns for discussions?
Stephen, I will note that my presentation is not there, but it will be in a moment.
Okay, thank you, Brett.
Yep.
So with the exception that Brett's presentation will be uploaded soon, then I will call to the questions. Anyone who oppose? All right, hearing none. Anyone who abstains? All right. Okay, one abstains. We have 18 in attendance. So this will be 16-1-0. We have one being the abstain. All right, thank you for perusing and approving the meeting minutes of the last meeting. All right, item number 5, updates from Brett on the AU call, AU-based e-requesting ballot sign up for the August-September ballot cycle.
Sure. So I will just talk to that. Just to note, the ballot, signing up for the ballot is still open. I will tell you the official numbers in a moment. Sorry, one sec. Okay, officially we have I think it's not working.
All right, Daniel has posted the numbers in chat.
Oh, thank you, Daniel.
So okay. We have the numbers there. AU call 49, AU base 49, AU call 52, AU request 52, and we have breakdowns of individuals and also organizations down below. So, all right, so we got the numbers.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Anything else on this item, Brett?
No, other than if you haven't signed up, please do so. You do have to be an HL7 Australia member to vote. This time we are being very careful with that. So so that will need to be ensure you are a member when you are signing up, and also remain a member if your membership is expiring through the ballot period. The details, the best place for details, I'll drop in the chat. Just here. So basically the key dates are on there. So the ballot finish, the sign-ups for the ballot finish on the 5th of August, and there's some links there to how to become a member if you're not, and how to sign up.
Yeah, and if you are curious about the dates, the last meeting's agenda, there are dates up there in in the meeting minutes for you to look into. And Daniel has also kindly put in the chat that the sign up closes close to midnight this Sunday. All right. So with that out of the way, let's move to item number 3, sex and gender. So we have a number of JIRA tickets in there. So I assume that Ruben will be taking us through those JIRA items. Is that correct? Do we have Ruben here? Yes, we do.
You do, and he will.
All right. So Ruben, you have 30 minutes. Do you want to take us through those JIRA tickets?
Yeah, sure. Can we start with the first one?
You want to share the screen, or you want me
no,
to...
it's okay. You can just go to the ticket. These are fairly straightforward, I believe, but we'll see how we go. Shall we start with 46415?
All right, I will put it on the screen. So that's the first one, 46415.
All right, so this is actually Danielle's ticket, but I recognize that she's in a bit of a noisy environment. So I'll do the first introduction to this, and if Danielle wants to add anything, I'll hand to her afterwards. So really, we have profile-specific implementation guidance on sex and gender concepts on AU Core profiles, which we, at least Danielle and I, believe would be better placed in its own guidance page, which can then be linked to from AU-based patient, AU-based practitioner, and AU-based related person profiles. I actually think that might have been a typo. It might have needed to be AU-based profiles, Danielle, given we're discussing AU-based.
Yeah, it is. Sorry about that, guys.
All good. So really, the other benefit of doing this is that you don't have to maintain this guidance in 3 or more places. It can all be in one place, and all those specific places like AU-based patient and AU-based practitioner can simply have a link to that single guidance. So very straightforward. Danielle, did you want to add anything to that?
I guess just to confirm, I've popped the links in the chat, that the guidance is, we've got some good guidance going on in AU base, and it's taking up quite a bit of space. It's sitting currently in the profile specific implementation guidance, and it's exactly the same across 3 profiles. And so it's just, it quite clearly to me would live much better in a dedicated guidance section we could link off to, and then have some nice kind of inline examples there explaining things, rather than taking up huge amounts of real estate prior to getting to the formal views of the profile.
Thanks, Danielle. So I'll first pause if there are any questions, and then I'd like to make a motion to accept the proposal.
All right, anyone has any questions? Okay, hearing none, then I fire away, Ruben, and you read out the motion so that we can document it properly in the meeting minute.
Sure. So I move that we create a singular guidance page, which contains all the guidance from the existing profiles, and that the existing profiles be updated with a link to the new guidance page.
I'm happy to second that, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. I think that Dushi is taking notes for this meeting minutes. Dushi, are we good with the motion?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
All right. Okay. Any further discussions?
I have
All right.
I have a single question.
Sure, fire away.
Is the guidance for these purposes the 2 bullet points or just the 1 bullet point?
It's like 14 bullet points, probably if you count it. It's the existing guidance. So we have guidance on gender identity and RSG and
then,
pronouns.
so when extent, okay, yep, fine. Good, thank you.
All right.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, then let's call the question. Anyone wants to abstain? Anyone oppose? Okay, hearing none, the number has now dropped to 17, so will still be 16. Hang on, what was what should be the order? 16-10 will be the abstain. Okay, so that motion carried. Okay, second bullet point. You want the go to that GR ticket, Ruben?
Please.
All right, so that's the second GR ticket.
Okay, so this one is subject to FHIR 46415 being found persuasive. Was that the one we just looked at? Sorry, memory short.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so given that one was found persuasive, we can continue with this one. And this is to request for guidance related to the name to use data element in AU Core linked, and yeah, I do mean AU Core, to be migrated to the single guidance page in AU Base, which we've just voted to create. So if you click on the link, Stephen, alongside AU Core, you'll find the guidance related to name to use that we have in AU Core.
Which one do I click on?
It's in the description alongside AU Core.
This one?
Nope. Next, further down on the right.
Oh, here.
Yep.
Okay.
So this guidance, it's felt would be beneficial to have in AU Base as well as in AU Core where it is at the moment. So this proposal is that we add this guidance for name to use to the new singular guidance page in AU Base.
And just
Happy
to
to click.
clarify, the guidance is to state that name to use is representing usual in name.use. So right under that heading, gender identity and related concepts.
Thanks, Danielle. Any
Are all the
questions?
MS elements the same in both standards?
Sorry, please repeat the beginning of that, Michael.
So I'm just wondering whether the MS on the elements is exactly the same. I mean, are we able to use exactly the same wording?
We are able to use exactly the same, sort of, not quite. I mean, the bit about name to use is represented using usual is exactly the same. We don't put must support in AU Base. So the guidance on how to represent the concept should be the same across both. But it would, the wording and inclusion in the base would need to indeed be tailored for base.
So do we just drop the first bit of the sentence there and just go this profile explicitly supports for all of them and drop the first must support part?
Yes, I think so. We wouldn't talk about must supports. We would say that's how you represent this. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I think that it'd be better to go individual gender identity extension.
Yeah. So some rewording
Supports this,
required as part of the move, I guess, is the...
Yeah. Yep. I think so.
Yeah.
We should probably go to drafting a resolution first.
Yes, I think
And
that
this
would be a good
copy
idea.
paste. Can we copy paste what's there right now, and we can put
Yeah.
this into resolution?
Perfect.
Copy and paste which one?
The
This
one that's in AU core at the moment.
This one
Yeah,
in
just-
the AU core?
yeah,
Which
just
part
the
do you
content.
want me to copy?
The
That whole
text under
section.
name to use. Yeah.
That
Oh, yeah.
one?
Yep.
The whole thing?
Yes. We'll
All
trim
right.
it when
We'll
in the
craft
place
it.
we copy it
Yeah.
to, we paste
Okay.
it to, sorry.
All
So
right, I'll
going back
paste
to
it
the tracker item,
to the tracker item, yes.
and if you click on submitted, there should be,
I need to
sorry,
log
at the
in.
top.
Oh, at the top. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to log in first.
Yeah, I need to
Ah.
log in, otherwise I can't do anything.
All right.
right.
If you click on the blue submitted box and propose disposition.
So paste the text here.
Yeah, and at the preamble state that add a name to use subsection to the sex and gender guidance page with the following text.
Add a name
To use.
to use guidance.
Yeah, guidance subsection to the sex and gender guidance page. With the following text. Yeah. All right.
Which part you want to edit?
We can say that related AU-based profiles explicitly support ... So take out by making name .user must support that element.
So we replace the text with AU base profile.
Profiles with an S. With an S.
Okay.
Right. And then name to use is represented using usual in name to use.
Remove the S on, remove the second S from supports.
Yeah. And I think we can take out the last statement here, Danielle. Do you agree?
That
It
one?
should be no, it starts with, it should be noted that name dot period.
Correct. That's AU, but AU4 specific. The sentence starting with it should be noted that name dot
At the bottom.
period is not a must support data element. That needs to go.
Okay, that's that last sentence.
Yes,
Yes.
that's right.
Okay, so it's gone.
Yep. And resolution here would be persuasive with mod.
Can I just
Resolution
further
persuasive
after this?
with
Yeah,
more.
persuasive with mod.
And impact will be
Non-substantive.
non-compatible,
No, it's non-substantive.
It's non-substantive.
non-substantive. We have not pre-applied it.
We have not. I
apply
think
to
we'd like
version.
this to be in the version going to ballot if we know that number.
Do we have a
We do,
number here?
Yeah.
Do we have one of those that we
It's
need
not available yet, is it? Is it?
Okay.
Yeah, it is available. 422 ballot.
422 ballot.
But
yeah.
why do we put in applied to version before we've applied it?
Because
yeah.
although it says past tense, it also can be used to indicate the version to which you intend to apply, according to the HL7 International Conference page. Yeah, I looked that up because I agree.
Yeah. It actually says it underneath the input box as well. All right. Okay, so we can make that a proposed disposition.
Yep.
And if there isn't any further questions or discussion,
So,
I'm happy to
I'd
move.
like to make a comment that
Yep.
under the expectation that yes, we'll put this in, it'll go on a guidance page, and I think that wording generally works. But I'd like us to understand that we will not just be limited to that. For example, I think we absolutely want to put an inlined example, right, on the guidance page to go, here's what that looks like. So I agree with this, but I'd also like us to not expect it to be limited to only just copy pasting that text, to have a nicely formatted guidance page, I guess.
So are you proposing any changes to the text here that we have on the screen?
I don't think so. I just also wanted to just have that be understood, I guess, by the members of the FHIR Working Group who are on the call, and if there are any concerns that what we're talking about is putting this content in, but that it might not be the only content, that we ideally, if it's a guidance page, we'd have an inline example in addition to this. And like a heading and that kind of thing that happens.
Okay, so you want those additional statement that you just mentioned to be captured in the meeting minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, meeting minutes would be good. I think
Okay.
I don't need them added in the resolution, just that that's the general understanding of how we would include that content.
All right, so that's good. So there's nothing else to do with this disposition. So we'll just go ahead with proposed disposition.
Not hearing any further feedback, so yeah, we can
Yep. All right.
click propose. And with that now included, I'd like to move that we accept that disposition.
All right. So we have a proposed disposition on the screen, and Ruben has a motion to accept this proposed disposition. Anyone wants to second?
I'll second it, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. All right. Any further questions or discussions? All right. In the interest of time, sorry to rush it a bit, given that we have a lot to go through. Hearing no questions, no oppositions, let's call to question. Anyone who want to abstain? Anyone oppose? All right, hearing none, so the number still.
There's one
Hang on,
abstention.
there's some abstention. Okay, one abstention. So Brian abstained. So we have 15, 1-0. All right. Okay, motion carried. All right, thank you. So we can close this one. All right. Next one.
Next one is 46430.
All right.
Okay, this is a very similar one to the last one. We have guidance in AU Core regarding the exchange of sex assigned at birth. And the proposal is for this guidance to be migrated to the single guidance page in AU Base as well. So there's a link again to probably worth looking at to make sure that it once again can be included as is, or if there's any specific AU Core stuff that might need to be taken out. Okay, so those who remember when we voted on this for AU Core, we actually have a AU Core sex assigned at birth profile, which profiles the RSG extension. It's only used for compliance or conformance, I think. Danielle, please jump in if I'm not remembering this correctly. And we also noted here that it's not marked as must support. So really, I guess what this boils down to is that since the proposal is that this subsection, sex assigned at birth, be moved over, and that the last statement be removed. Danielle, is that right?
Yeah, what I'm interested in doing, and maybe Brett, you should go first. That's okay.
No, that's right. I was probably going to agree with you. Go ahead.
Is that we've made some decisions now in the core, which is, again, being our minimum requirements and how we support things. But if you're going to represent the concept of sex assigned at birth in Australia, you want to do that using a particular structure we're defining core, which has a code for how you do that and a value set. And I really think we do need to mention that in base. I think it would be a poor thing for us to have a page describing how sex and gender concepts are supported in Australia in AU base without mentioning the fact that sex assigned at birth has a profile defined in core. So that's what I'm very interested in ensuring we maintain that link between.
So can I clarify, Daniel, the profile AU core sex assigned at birth is the suggestion that AU base refer to the profile in AU core, or that it have its own profile?
I think, well, certainly by the time we go to ballot snapshot, I don't expect us to put a base one, and I'm not sure I would anyway. I think it can just refer to it. Where there's an existing profile that defines what is expected, it can just refer to it.
All right.
I don't like referring to things that because that's not even balloted approved content. So I think it'd be better to be a little less specific.
So you're suggesting that this would be a next version of AU base? There's no indication that AU.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should refer to it if we don't use it. Yeah.
But we do use it. What we don't say is it's applied. It is defined as this is the way you do this.
But not in this spec. All we've got is say we definitely say you should represent sex assigned at birth as the standard extension. Sure, that's true. And maybe we should note the terminologies that are there as invariants.
I'll propose instead
that
what we should do in base is just, I guess, state as guidance what is actually defined in the core profile, what the concept would be for RSG for sex at birth, and what the value set should be used, and present that as guidance. Is that what you're suggesting instead of referring up to the profile? Okay. Yeah,
exactly. So that's just exactly what we've got in the spec. So which I think is helpful because it's just saying use the standard extension, and we have indicated which terminologies to apply. They're actually described in invariants, but
they described in a profile, I think. Your core right now.
No? Yeah, but not in AU base.
Not in AU base, exactly.
Yeah. So I think we should just say what we do.
So, Brett, is the issue that AU base shouldn't refer to resources in a implementation guide that it doesn't depend upon?
Don't like it because we don't have any.
Right. No.
Yeah.
I'm just wanting to clear. So if AU base did depend upon AU core, then it would be okay.
Yeah,
we don't want to do that for all sorts of reasons. So that means that AU base should never refer to things in AU.
I'm going to contradict that. Yeah. I get Brett's point that AU core is not valid yet. What it is, as in it is the agreed national definition. I would suggest I'm okay going to ballot in AU base with the guidance from core. When this profile is actually valid and this is how you do it, I would suggest that we actually do say, hey, there's a core profile.
So, I, to a certain degree, agree with Brett, but that's a side issue. In the interest of time, are we close to having a motion on the table?
I don't think we're close yet, but I want to put another possibility forward and maybe my own perspective on this.
Okay.
I guess what I would like to see is, well, I guess first a clarifying question. Danielle, is that AU core sex assigned at birth profile, does it necessarily need to live in AU core for any reason? Or could a resolution, it does need to live there?
There will always have to be one because with complex extensions, core needs to define which part of the extension. RSG has so many elements and not all of them must support. So for sex at birth, we've picked 2 out of 8 8 and 9.
Yep.
And said these are must support. So that's always going to be important.
So
Yeah.
it wouldn't work if we said, for example, that we put that AU core sex assigned at birth profile into AU base and then refer to it from AU core.
Not
That's
as
not
as
how you
is.
do it. You sort of would.
Yeah.
We would be compliant. So we may indeed have for profiles of RSG and core, we may indeed end up with base things to carry across the terminology and fixed value requirements you talk about. What we can't do, given the nature of extensions, is have our base definition of the profile actually be the AU base profile. We would look. I'm going to say technically no, but in practice, yes. As in, we can have a base sex assigned at birth and a core sex assigned at birth, and they can work like a base and a core.
Yes. Yeah, because that's what I would think as well, is that you would have an AU base sex assigned at birth with the terminology bindings recommended, and then you would have layers on layers. But yeah.
We just go for ballot snapshot, which is like what, like 5 days away. Let's just put the guidance in. Can we just like for the ballot snapshot? Let's just go with the guidance equivalent rather than a profile.
Yeah.
I like the idea of just putting the guidance, and then we can work out the contentious part later. I don't think there's.
Yeah, I agree.
I suspect everybody agrees that it's a good idea to put in base a thing saying sex assigned at birth, there's things to do it, and then the argument over what the details of that are, so we can just put in the common weak claims about sex assigned at birth.
All right. So as a resolution or disposition, should we stop at adding a subsection to the singular guidance page for sex and gender in AU base, and the content will be sex assigned at birth is represented using this extension, full stop.
So do you want to do the same thing for that?
Sorry, friendly amendment is to say that sex assigned at birth should be represented, and then we take the code that's in the AU core profile as the like RSG.code and the value set, and we say that's the should. So that's the guidance equivalent of the profile.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Happy to accept that amendment.
So do we want to go back to
Sorry,
here?
I got more questions. So do we refer to do we need to identify the value set that we have?
Yes. Yeah, in court, that's the guidance. So sex at birth is almost like an observation. It's a code value equivalently using the RSG extension. That's what's in the AU core profile and with the supports and obligation. What we do is we take the code value definition and we put that as purely guidance in base.
So I've got more questions. So do we need to include the source information as well? Because that is part of the...
No, that's not part of sex assigned at birth. It's not part of the profile. Only code and value. Only.
Yeah.
As in the code, which I think is a SNOMED code that says this is how you know this is a sex at birth RSG. And the value
is a SNOMED code.
Yeah, that is, these are the values you can use. That's the guidance equivalent of the profile. In fact, Stephen, if you could click on AU core sex at birth, sex assigned at birth, in that thing we can see what the profile looks like. No, down to sex at birth.
And
the profile.
This one. Yep.
That one there. And if we just pop in there, you can see there's only two elements for the profile. If you look at the differential table, there's the extension, which says with the code that says it's there's two. One is the value, which is saying this is the values you can use to represent sex at birth, which is the biological sex value set. And then here's the fixed code you use to say, and we mean sex at birth. That's it.
But we also have other invariants in our AU-based patient that include source
in the RSG profile. These are the additional things on how you do sex at birth. They're two. This is a subset of RSG here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fine. That makes sense. Cool. Thank you.
All right. Do we want now to come back to the ticket and then go and do similar thing to draft a disposition proposal?
Sure.
All right. Okay, what do you want to put here?
So add a sex assigned at birth subsection in the single sex and gender guidance page with the
So
title.
sex assigned at birth.
Yeah.
Subsection, yeah.
Yep. To the single sex and gender guidance page.
Yep.
With the following content. Then copy what's there for AU Core right now, and we'll just tweak that again.
All right. How do you want to change it?
So I think we want to replace profiled by AU Core sex assigned at birth and state with the constraints in the AU Core sex assigned at birth profile represented as guidance.
So you want to change this one?
Now starting with the word profiled by.
Okay.
And actually starting with as profiled. So replace as profiled with the content. Whoops. Nope.
No.
You've just removed a whole lot of stuff there. You want to start replacing with.
You remove what we want to keep.
Yeah. So replace as profiled by. And just say with the constraints. You can start typing. In the, and then go to the end of sex assigned at birth on the end of the sentence. No, sorry, the end of the sentence you're in, Stephen.
And the sentence I'm in. Okay, cool. Yep,
yeah,
clear.
And then just before the full stop, say represented as guidance. Yep, represented as guidance. And that should be constraints with an S. I don't think we need that last sentence, Danielle. Do you agree?
I agree. That can go.
Yeah, that can go.
We've already talked about what the constraints are, but it's two particular aspects. So I think we're all understanding what that means.
Okay, so we can remove that text you've highlighted, Stephen.
Okay, hang on.
And its resolution is persuasive with mod again at the top. And I don't think this is an enhancement. Is it? It's guidance.
No, it is an enhancement. It is an enhancement. Yeah, we're adding more things that are nice.
All right, enhancement then.
Okay.
Change impact.
Non-substantive still.
Are you
potentially compatible with substantive. Yeah, it's iffy between the two.
Yeah, I'd say compatible and substantive. And the version is the same as the last one, ballot.
Is that this one?
Yep. And
all right.
I think that's the disposition.
Yep. Would you?
I think so.
Okay. That sentence that we've got there at the moment, sex assigned at birth is represented using the person recorded sex or gender extension with the constraints in the AU Core sex assigned at birth represented as guidance. Those last
sorry, you're right. The word profile needs to go in before represented.
Noting, I'm not expecting us to be copying and pasting that unlike the last one. I'm viewing this as the directions for the people who will be updating the PR to go to the sex at birth profile and get what those constraints are and then reword them as guidance. That's what I'm expecting this does.
Yeah, I think Richard's pointing out that the direction is grammatically problematic. I think we need the
Yeah.
word profile before the word represented.
Yeah.
So where do you want the word profile?
Before the word represented.
Before the word represented birth profile?
Yes. Thanks, Richard. Good catch.
Are we good?
I'm happy with the disposition.
All right, then let's get the here, and then we have now a motion on the table, moved by Ruben.
Yep.
Anyone wants to second that?
Danielle, I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, any further questions or discussions? All right, hearing none, let's call to the questions. Anyone wants to abstain? Okay, anyone oppose? All right, hearing none, so it's 16, it's 1600.
No,
Hang on,
Brian
I think there were
abstained.
two. There might
Is
have
it,
been two.
hang on, I haven't seen any hands up, so do we have
Oh.
abstains?
Christy, I believe, put her hand up, and Brian, I think, popped in the chat that he's abstained.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, right, all right. In that case, then we have two, then we have 14, 2-0. All right, motion
Okay.
still carried. I think that concludes, hang on, all the,
There was one
What?
left, but I'm not sure if I'm out of time.
you are.
Ah,
So that's this one, 46431. So
Yeah, let's leave that one to ballot.
okay.
all right, so we'll leave this one to ballot. Okay, so item number 4, still in the RSG realm. So do we want to skip this one and leave it to ballot, or do we need
No,
to?
this is crucial before we go to
Yeah,
ballot to
need that
do
one.
this.
All right. So if this is crucial, that needs to be treated before we go to ballot. Then let's look at this one.
All right, I'll speak to this one again. This eventuated from a discussion Danielle and I had at the Brisbane FHIR AU Core testing event. Look, I think it's fair to say at the outset that we were not that happy with where we are at the moment in terms of the binding we have for RSG type. And that is because we've, I won't say taken liberties, but for lack of any better spot to put the source or provenance of particular RSG values, so things like Medicare or the NHSD and other sources, we decided to create a code system and a value set that had things like that bound to the type value. And we did that because the only avenue we had for recording the provenance or the source of an RSG value was in source document, which implies that it comes from a document. So following that meeting I had with Danielle, I took a proposal to the International Patient Administration Work Group committee, was responsible for the RSG FHIR extension. And I recognize Brian's here. Brian chaired a few of those meetings. To basically see if we could do any better on this. Where that landed was they agreed with the need for something to hold non-document sources of RSG values, and it eventuated in the creation of a new element simply titled source for capturing that kind of information. Accordingly, this tracker now exists to rectify, I suppose, what we had done and to restrict the RSG type binding to only refer to actual RSG types and to not say anything about the sources of the RSG value. As a practical matter, I've indicated in the description the steps I think would be taken to realize this if the issue is regarded as persuasive. We'd simply need to update the AU recorded sex or gender type code system artifact to remove all those now unnecessary concepts. And similarly, we'll need to update the guidance and examples we have for RSG type insofar as it refers to holding source information. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Did you say that had gone back to the sex and gender working group?
It had. I discussed that with the co-lead as we had agreed before, and they were supportive.
Cool. I just wasn't aware that had happened yet. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it did. Sorry, I outlined that in last week's PA call, Brian, which you were an apology for, I think.
Yeah.
Could you follow the link to the list of codes so we can see what we've got and what we're proposing to move to?
Yeah,
And
I put
I
a
might
note.
also-
I put a note in there in the agenda about which things are getting removed, so it would be good to look at them.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Is that this link?
Yep, that one.
I go to that page. So that's the one.
Yeah.
So I think one
So
of the
this-
things that we want to confirm is that the RSG extension was a whole bunch of different elements. And one of those is type, which we've been using to say sex at birth or something else. And as Ruben pointed out, we had a whole number of things we were interested in being able to say. And we have what now looks like conflated two axes. Information about where does this really come from, things like My Health Record or our HI service or APRA, and what is this thing? Is it sex at birth? Is it sex or gender? Is it some kind of gender? We're not sure. And the reason we'd conflated those in the beginning is because we were looking for spots to put this more detailed information. Now, work has continued on in the international space, which has identified the natural future spot for this further information about APRA or My Health Record. And it's not this element, it's some other element. So what we're looking to do is come back to our original draft and clean that up so that it represents the international position.
Danielle, are you still talking?
I'm not sorry, I'm trying to go on mute
Okay.
because I know it's really noisy where I am. So sorry about that.
So, Ruben, what
Yeah.
are you? You have that as the motion. Is that what it is? Or
Yes.
Okay.
The 3 bullet points are what the change I'd like to see happen, and everything above that is the reason for it.
Right. And then with this page, are we going to do anything to this value set?
Yep.
No, hang on. The value set doesn't need to change. The
No, the
code
value set's the
system
same.
needs the
Code
code
system.
system needs to change.
Okay.
So if you click on that green link in the middle of the page, terminology.hl7.org, it's in the middle. It was down there at the bottom, Stephen. Just above the table in green.
Oh, this one. It's
Yeah.
not clickable.
Oh, does the URL resolve?
Oh, that is the code system you're looking at. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So,
So
it's,
that one.
we
That needs
are
to change.
talking.
No,
No.
that's good.
It doesn't need to change. Just the concepts. The code system's definition needs to change.
Okay.
So everything apart from the first line, sex-gender, should be removed as concepts.
So we just end up with one code, right, Ruben? Just
Yes,
sex
that's
gender.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So no
All right.
document, no insurance schemes, no registration and accreditation scheme, no digital health infrastructure service.
Exactly.
That's right. So those things aren't going to be forgotten, of course. When we get around to adding a binding to the new RS3.source element, we can look at bringing some or all of those back in future.
as
All
part of a different code system.
As part of a different code system, absolutely.
Okay, so any other questions before we get a seconder? All right, hearing none. Anyone wants to second this proposed disposition, which is here?
I'll second it, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Any further questions or discussions? All right, hearing none, let's call to the questions. Anyone who wants to abstain? I haven't seen any hands up. Anyone opposed?
Christy popped her
We've got
hand up.
Christy. Yeah.
Hang on, okay. Now, why is it I don't see hands up? Okay, here we are. Oh, Christy has got hands up. All right, and so we have one abstain and no opposition.
Hang on, Heath's got his hand up.
Hang on, Heath.
That's a abstain as well.
Oh, you are abstaining as well. So okay. Why is that?
Oh.
I can't see.
I have a question. I'm sorry it's so late. I have a question having looked at the value set. Could you show the value set that uses this code system?
Here.
There's a link
No,
at
no,
the
it's
top.
not. Yeah,
No?
yeah.
AU recorded sex or
What is
gender
sex or
type.
gender type?
No.
It's
Yeah, just
on the
in the
page
middle of
you're
page
at,
test. Yeah.
in blue.
The bullet
near
point. Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's it.
Okay. So if we scroll down, we see that this value set, it has 3 values from Loink, and it's going to have one new value. The sex gender is going to be the new one we've added.
Yep.
How does sex/gender differ from the ones above? Is it a case of I don't know which it is?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Perfect.
Okay, right. So at the end, we'll have sex assigned at birth as an option, sex as an option, gender as an option, and it's
The
sex or gender, but I don't know which as an
Yeah,
option.
Yes.
Yes,
That's right.
exactly.
The source might have both,
Good.
as a
Thank
box.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 4 and yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's my question well answered.
All right. Okay. In that case, we're still back to the voting. So we have 2 abstains. Anyone opposed? All right. We don't have any opposition. All of a sudden, we have 19 coming in. So with the 19 with the newcomer, I assume that you haven't opposed or you haven't abstained. So therefore, you're all good. All right.
That might have been me.
Oh, that might have been you. Okay.
That's why I abstained. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Heath. All right. In that case, then we have 15 to 0. Motion still carried. Now we are really running out of time. So number 5 has got a whole bunch of FFM review matters to be taken care of. And Brett is your baby. So
All right.
leave
So
it to you to take it away.
Our mission here is to be not too precious, okay? so yeah, let's have it. Okay, let's work through this. So it's I might actually, to accelerate this along, just to frame this. So basically there's material in the spec currently that's marked as FMM 0, which is really just draft material that hasn't been approved by the committee to be satisfactory in terms of we haven't actually indicated that we think it's at a level that it's usable. All right, so really before we publish those things, we want to go through all those FMM 0 artifacts and decide should they be FMM 1? We're happy with the content. Should things stay at FM 0, which I think means that we shouldn't be publishing them in the ballot material because the committee hasn't actually approved them, and or are these things that need to be deprecated? Now we have some issues. We have things published in our previous working standard at FMM 0, which I think is a bit of a poor bit of form. We should really just be publishing things that are FMM 1. So there's a question whether we need to deprecate things because we have published them or not. So that's probably a different question. But I think if we could go through and at least identify the things that are FMM1 for sure, that would be a good start. And then maybe we can come back to things that are more difficult than that. So the first set, and I probably want to do this as a set because this might help move things along. We have talked about recorded sex or gender. We just did item 4 and agreed to that. So that's all good. So I assume that change will be applied. So what we're saying now is we have a value set and a code system, which is the ones the ones we just looked at. So with that agreement, I think at the moment they're FMM0, and I would say that it would make sense to take them to FMM1. So therefore we've got that there. Danielle?
Well, I guess I was just following. So with my A from an RSG perspective, I'm very interested in having this cycle go to ballot. And from an A4 perspective, the recent change to clarify source versus gender type, there are no further outstanding concerns on the semantic nature of the model of this content. So I'm very happy for this to go to FMM1.
Yeah, cool. Actually, it might be best. Can I maybe propose we do that one because I think there's no problem with this one at all. So I would move that we accept both the value set and code system at FMM1 that we've just looked at.
Noting it's more than just one value set and code system. There's 1, 2, 3.
I think maybe we'll do the first one and then because we might need to look at the others. So can we just do the first value set and first code system?
So this one and that one?
Yeah.
All right. So you want those?
Yeah. So they're the ones we just saw.
So that's the one that we just saw.
That one? After the changes,
Yeah, after the changes.
Yeah. That the changes we just agreed to be applied. That this goes to FMM. Yes.
Yeah. That's what I'm moving or seconding as well.
Okay. Hang on. Let me show this. That's the same, is that right? AU?
Yeah, that's the value set.
But the same as that one.
The value set brings the standard set plus the one extra code left in our AU code system. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, it'll just be the first 4 codes on that list.
So this one, you are making a proposal to move to FMM1.
Yeah,
right?
Take both of those to FMM1.
Yep. All right. So there's a motion on the table. All right. Anyone wants to second that?
Danielle, happy to second.
Thank you, Danielle. Any further questions or discussions?
I have a question about the code system. The code system reads as if it is a complete code system for sex and gender types, where it looks to me like it's a set of, basically it's an extension. Oh no, it's not an extension. Nope, sorry, withdraw that, don't worry. No question.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Without further questions or discussions, let's call to questions. Anyone wants to abstain? Anyone opposes? I'll make sure that I don't see any hands up. No, I haven't seen any hands up. So therefore, motion carry with 1800.
Cool. So we might move on to the next 2. So there's maybe just look at the value set to start with, Stephen, and we'll navigate down.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So this is another RSG.
Is it this one or that one?
That one. Yeah.
Yep.
So this is now this was discussed in earlier meetings as well. So we have our document type coding. So I think this went through some discussion and we tweaked it. So I think at the moment we've got 2 standard LOINC codes which have come. If you scroll up slightly, Stephen, just to see the source there. you scroll up a little more? Yeah. So there's basically two codes from Link, which are birth certificate, driver's license, and we've also defined some terms to cover passport as citizenship certificate and birth notification. So this is essentially a working set at the moment. So I think this has kind of been discussed as being reasonable at this stage. So that AU code system is the code system referred to, which includes those three terms.
All right. So that comes to this too. Is that correct?
So I'd move that we accept that at FMM1 and just take that to ballot.
All right. So there is a motion on table to move this to FMM1. All right. Anyone wants to second this motion?
Michael?
Okay, Michael, thank you. All right. Any further questions or discussions? Okay, hearing none, in the interest of time, let's call the questions. Anyone wants to abstain? I haven't seen any hands. Anyone wants to oppose? All right, I haven't seen any hands either. All right, so we have 1800, motion carried.
Cool. So we'll move on to jurisdiction value set. So this is again for use in RSG for the jurisdiction element. So we have identified, we have a variant saying.
I have a question. We've done a value set, but we haven't done the code system that the value set.
It's using existing code system.
AU recorded sex or gender source document type,
Yeah,
and it says that's proposed to go to FMM1, and so surely it should go to FMM1 if we want the value set to be FMM1.
Let's
on,
clarify the motion. I understood the motion to be a combination of the value set and code system. So I think maybe we need to redo it just without the understanding, since that wasn't necessarily universally.
Yeah.
Richard,
I believe,
are you?
I believe both should go. I believe both should go to one. I thought we had just voted on the value set. If we have voted on the value set and the code system, I have no problem. I just thought I was only voting on the value set.
I thought that we voted on both.
Fine, good. My misunderstanding. In which case, I've got no issue.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Okay. Back to this one, jurisdiction.
Yeah. So we're basically pulling together a set of jurisdictional terms. So what we've done here is take the standard jurisdiction value set, included that, and also then added our local Australian states and territories codes in this case. So this is effectively a working set that includes all of the regular international jurisdictions plus our state details. Yeah. So again,
all right.
I would move this to FMM1.
That's the motion here. For this value set extensions to be moved to FMM1. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone wants to second it? Michael, thank you. All right. Any further questions or discussions? All right. Hearing none, then let's call the questions. Anyone wants to abstain? Anyone wants to oppose? All right, make sure that I haven't seen any hands up. Okay, no hands up. All right, so therefore, motion carry with 1800.
Awesome.
All right, we have about 20 minutes left. All right, Brett?
Yeah, that's right. We'll do our best, I think. So PID identifier, this has been in the spec for quite some time. And is still at level 0. So I think could I just check, Stephen? That's at level 0 of your scroll up. on that one. Yeah,
Well, I'm
maturity
going
level
to
0.
come across this quickly and just
Yeah.
go, I have in a motion that this goes to FMM1. It's
Yeah.
well-defined, consistent with
It's well-defined,
the
yeah.
requirements.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's what I would say as well. So I would second that.
All right.
Because
So
it's a
we
well-defined
have
license
Daniel
record
motioning
identifier.
this profile, the AUPA ID identifier being moved to FM1, and we have Brett seconding that. All right. Any further questions or discussions? Okay. Hearing none, let's call to the questions. Anyone wants to abstain? All right. Anyone wants to object? All right. Nothing either. So therefore, the motion carry with 1800. All right. The next one is
Are you residential aged care service identifier? Again, this is a well-defined identifier for aged care service identifier. There's also an NS Electronic Health, which is agency allocated URL. So I think it's defined and well-defined and well-structured. So yeah, I would just move that we accept that as a good good profile.
So motion, hang on, wrong highlight. All right, this highlighted item is the motion on the table to accept it to migrate from FMM0 to FMM1. All right, anyone wants to second this?
I'll second it, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. All right. In the interest of time, let's call to the question. Assuming that there is no further questions or objections. Okay. Anyone wants to abstain? Anyone wants to oppose? All right. Hearing none, we have 1800. All right. All good.
Thanks, Stephen. Great. We'll go on to coverage profile.
Okay.
So at the moment, this is going to be very important for e-requesting. At the moment, this doesn't have a lot of actual rules or detail in it. So it's really just like it has a set of identifiers that would be appropriate to use as identifiers in a coverage statement. So I think this is well defined, although not very exciting. But it does give some of the downstream specs a reference point, and I think we would probably get some good comments around this about additions that we need in ballot. Heath,
just remind me what the requirements are to go to FMM1 around implementations of this resource.
You do have a good point, actually. If we do, you might
want to look at the maturity level.
If you look at FMM1, there's
I'm
some
not
words
sure
in there
it would do is substantially complete.
Substantially complete. Yeah, that might be a good reason not to have it FM1. Actually, let's just say that yes, it is obviously not substantially complete. So let's.
Which I think we should motion. Like I think we should have a recorded agreement on the current status of how we view this profile.
So I think we're still working on it.
I can't think of a reason to not use it, but I can't think of a reason to bother using it.
It's not finished. That's pretty true.
So it's the coverage type attribute that we're likely to use in e-requesting. I think we should hold off on this one until there's been some more work on it in e-requesting.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure what the implementation element. It says ready for implementation. I'm assuming that we don't need to have any.
Means testing. Sorry, ready for implementation means ready to start trying to testing rather than being production.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But we
think it's
haven't had
okay.
anyone test it yet, have we?
It doesn't need to have been tested.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just the committee thinks it's okay to use. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's my
Yeah.
understanding too.
yeah.
Tested
So I
is
think
for higher levels of FMM.
Yeah.
So I think Heath has pointed out a very big flaw in my plan to take it to FMM1, which is it's definitely not substantially complete. So I think I think we have to motion to keep that at FMM0.
So this one is withdrawn.
Yes, true. Nothing changes if unless we
so
want to
this one
let's
is
just say it's
withdrawn.
withdrawn. Yeah, if
This
we'll have
would
to
seem to
copy
be a good.
Sorry, put it in the minutes then, that the general position
Was-
was
yeah.
that this isn't ready to go to FMM1 vote.
I guess it's as long as we're happy that it's not broken, it's just incomplete.
Yeah. I think that's
This is an example of something that I think is useful to have in AU base, even though it is FMM0.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the criteria here is that the artifact is substantially completed and it doesn't pass this test. So therefore, this is withdrawn. That's the if Daniel, if you want that to be recorded, that will be what will be recorded.
I do
Yeah.
because like a positive assertion of absence, we have discussed it and we think that there's still work to be done.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All good. Then
I think
next.
we've also discovered that FMM0 things are reasonable to publish when their problems are just incompleteness rather than brokenness.
maybe.
Yeah.
All right. So
Heath, did you have a point?
I don't want to dwell on it too much, but the coverage type value set associated with this, that is no longer an AU specific one. Is that right? Because it's
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
we actually don't have time to go into the value set.
That's
Sorry
right.
to cut you off, Heath. We can come back to revisit it in the subsequent meetings, but I want us to move on because there are a few other stuff that we need to hopefully get to. All right. AU-based substance.
Substance. Yep. So here we have some bindings to the substance value set defined in NCTS. So I think that's pretty much covering all the things we wanted to say about substance at this point. So it's really just identifying a recommended terminology usage. So I think that one is well defined and makes sense and is complete as much as we think it's going to be complete at this stage. So I would move that one to FMM1.
All right. Brett has a motion on the table to move AU-based substance profile to FMM1. Anyone wish to second that?
I'll second that, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. All right. Any further questions or discussions? Okay, hearing none, let's call to the questions. Anyone wants to abstain? All right, anyone wants to oppose? Okay, hearing none, so we have 1800 motion carried. All right.
Nice. Australians veteran status is an extension to represent veteran status. We've talked about this year. So I think we all came to agreement that this would be a way to do it. We do have I believe that's an NCTS value set that's bound there. And Danielle.
Who's on this one? Just noting James came from Telstra Health. Just before we go to FMM1, can you comment on if you guys have gone and looked at what the AU base implementation of that is and confirmed that lines up?
No. Sorry, Danielle, I didn't quite get all of that. It's very noisy in your
I
background.
didn't either.
Yeah, sorry. Veteran status comes from you guys. Is the AU base representation? Have you guys looked at that?
No. we
Brian's
might
also
wanna-
pointing out that value set is actually should be considered as well, because it's an HL7 Australia value set, which is not listed in our content here. So, Stephen, do you want to click on that the binding there, the veteran status? Yeah.
Where?
Yeah, down just down in the binding for the value there.
Here?
Yeah, click on that one. Oh no, that's a health terminologies one. That's all right. It's health terminologies. I'll take it back. So that's NCTS. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all right. So we've got a good coding. That's okay. Yeah, cool.
All right. So your motion.
Yeah. So I guess the question. Yeah. So like it's well defined, and I think we did discuss it. So I'd be happy to take it to FMM1 as being a usable extension based on a requested.
All right. We have a motion by Brett. All right. Anyone wants to second this?
I'll second it, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. All right. We are really closing to the bottom of the half hour. All right.
Yeah.
I'm
going to need 5. Yeah, I got 5 for a harder question, but the yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's very quickly call to the questions. Anyone wants to abstain?
Hang on, I've got a question.
Sorry, you have a question. Okay. All right.
Has anyone talked to Leidos or the defence about this, because they're building some stuff around this? I think they've got a similar concept. I think you need to go and talk to them.
I have to bring it here or look at the ballot.
Okay.
Yeah, it was raised through Telstra Health, and
I think research like that was done some years ago. If Defence are now working at it, then we may wind up with a new set of values. But these were investigated a couple of years ago, which does, and as if nobody's looked at them since, then they may no longer be fashionable.
No, I'm happy for it to get feedback through ballot. That's fine.
Yeah, and we do have a good value set in NCTS control, so I think that they should, if they have an issue with the value set concept, that would be a good place to feedback. Yeah,
I think they might be related to stuff in Meteor or something like that.
So if we are waiting for ballot inputs, do we have a way to ping Defence to draw their attention to that?
We have some people registered that are part of that project, so
okay,
we should be able to. Yeah.
All right. In that case, then we have Brett as a motion, and if I remember correctly, Richard, you second that?
Yes, I did.
Yep. All right. So after the discussions and questions, let's call to the questions. Anyone wants to abstain? All right. Hearing none. Anyone wants to oppose? Okay. All right. Nothing heard. So therefore, we have now one drop. So we have 18 numbers. So we have 1700. Motion still carried.
Cool.
All right.
Stephen, I might like to skip ahead just to do an easier one.
Okay.
I've got down name context.
Name context, this one?
Yeah. So
you want this one?
Context. Yes, please. Thanks.
All right.
So that's the extension that we have talked about in the last month or two. So that's the extension to include that name context coding to say to cover IHI and HPI validation, indicating that the name is one of the uses is that. So I think we've covered this material in previous meetings quite in detail. So I think based on all that discussion, I would say it's ready to go to FMM1 and be published.
All right.
So I would propose we do that. I would motion that.
All right. Brett and Richard. All right.
Michael.
Sorry, was it Michael?
I'm sure it was Michael.
Yeah, I second it, Michael.
Okay, right. Thanks, sometimes I can't differentiate
He
your
was very
voices.
quick.
Okay. All right. So Michael second with Brett motion. So any further questions or discussions? All right. We have numbers dropping. Let's call the questions. Anyone wants to abstain? Anyone wants to oppose? All right. Hearing none, we are down to 16. So motion still carries with 1700. Now, with 5 minutes left, do you want to do another one, Brett?
I would like to ask actually a general question to just get what people would like to go ahead with. There's a question about whether we should be publishing FMM0 material in our working standard spec. So that is probably the choice to make. We have a number of things here at FMM0 left to do. So the question is probably, do we actually publish those as part of the ballot content at FMM0 and get some feedback on it, or do we cull these out?
Well, the question is probably, if we count it out, how do we get visibilities for those that has FMM0?
Yeah, so I'd say we would keep it in the CI build, but it wouldn't be in the published branch for the ballot. So they just would continue to exist in the CI build until we decided to take them out if we wanted to. Yeah, so there's a few here that are kind of have been around for a while. Have been sitting on FM0 for quite a while. So I think we either need to decide that they're going to go forward to FMM1, or probably they're not suitable for inclusion. But I don't know if we're not going to get to decide that today. So I think it's more of a publishing question, really. Should we just leave everything that's FMM0 that we haven't considered in the ballot content?
I think that coverage should go in, even though it's 0. On the other hand, things like ethnicity and I think are quite reasonable to drop out. So that might be just me.
No hard rules. yeah. So I guess the question is how do we decide what to do? Because I can say we have published
ballot,
before. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. We've gone to ballot. It's one way to get feedback on these things.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. I'd say leave them in for the ballot and take them out for publish, and ask people if they want to have it remain as part of ballot feedback.
Good. I think that's I like that as a good approach. So we just maybe just document that as an approach.
Yep.
That's good. I'm really happy with that. It also means that we don't have to worry about these decisions so hard right now. But so I think I guess in interest of time, we're probably not going to get through the rest. So I think the ones that remain, which are ethnicity, medication strength, and program participation related things, we'll just leave them in ballot, and maybe we'll put some notes on the material. I think would be probably a good way to do it. So we could specifically say this is a draft material. We'd like people to indicate whether they think it's suitable to retain or whatever. That might be a good way to do it. We'll so explicitly call those ones out. But the rest, that's
all plan. Yep.
Excellent.
Okay. I think we are running out of time with only 1 minute left. So I think
we are done as far as we're going to get to do.
Okay.
So that is our last meeting before we publish. So we'll action all that stuff and get a publication out next week.
All right. Sounds like a plan. All right. If
Thanks,
no
everyone.
further matters for discussions, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you for everyone's participation. We'll meet again at the next meeting.
Thanks.
Good job, guys. Cheers.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.